Good evening, everyone. I'm David. We're here live streaming with Jacques Boudreau, and we'll introduce Alex Joehl in a few minutes or in a few seconds. Thanks for tuning in. We are at YouTube, X, Rumble, and Facebook. If you're at Facebook, X, or YouTube, you can interact and share comments, and we can see your comments and we can interact that way. So we'd be happy to do that. I guess I'll pass it over to you, Jacques. Good evening.
Good evening, David. Thank you. Well, we're delighted to have one of our strongest Libertarian member and active participant on the call. Alex is joining us from 40 kilometers out of Vancouver. I forget, Langley?
Is it? Langley, yeah, Langley, British Columbia.
Right, okay. Alex has run many times and is going to run in the upcoming by-election. So it's great to have him. We're going to discuss British Columbia politics and see how we go from here. So Alex, welcome to the Libertarian Lens. It's great to have you. And maybe we could start by asking you to say a little bit more than what I just mentioned.
Yeah, of course. And thank you guys for inviting me on. Anytime I get a chance to talk politics to like-minded people, it's a little bit less like banging my head against a brick wall. Yeah, I've been a libertarian since college, which now is much longer than I care to admit. But I became a classic liberal, and I sought out where was there a political party that I could identify with, and that became the Libertarian Party. And so in 2008, it was the first time that I ran. I ran federally in Surrey North. I ran 2 more times federally, including the last time was 2019 in Langley Aldergrove. And I think that time I had about 499 votes, just missed the 500 threshold. I've run 3 times provincially for the BC Libertarian Party. I've run for mayor of my hometown, the township of Langley. I've run in a by-election for school trustee, and I've run for council. So this will be my first time running in this riding. It's called Cloverdale Langley City, and I actually don't live in it. It's the neighboring riding. So it'll be very unfortunate that I don't even get to vote for myself.
Who, this by-election is the result of what? Someone quit or?
Yeah, here, I'm just going to play with the lighting here. That's not the one I want. Sorry, being on the West Coast, I took it for granted, the natural lighting, and of course it's slipping away as I speak. So I think this is the best we're going to get.
It looks great. Looks good.
Okay, thanks, guys. So yeah, what happened was a character named John Aldag. He was a Liberal Party MP. Had been twice elected, but he decided to step away to run provincially for the NDP. And so what happened was he actually lost. I thought he was a shoo-in to win, a career bureaucrat who then became a politician, earned his pension. And I thought he was just trying to avoid the Trudeau, train wreck. And unfortunately for him, the consensus here in BC has begun to swing to the right wing now. And I think that really leads into what we're seeing across the entire country. So we had, here, just a little bit better. There, it's a little better. Yeah, we had in this province, there was a Liberal Party, but they were actually the right of center party. And the BC Conservatives were even smaller than the BC Libertarian Party, if you can imagine that. So what happened over the last 4 years, we saw splintering of that Liberal Party. They even changed their branding to being called BC United. And just at the last moment, I think it was about 2 months before the election, they pulled the plug. And they threw all their support behind the BC Conservatives and trying not to split the vote. So what we saw was the NDP regained their government that they had. However, we did see a big swing to the right wing. We even saw the socialist policies of the NDP start to take a turn to the right. They turned back on their drug decriminalization policy. They even said they would scrap the carbon tax if Trudeau let them. And that's something that would have been unheard of even a year ago from a left of center party in our province. So definitely the pendulum is swinging to the right. I think we can all agree that if we had to pick left or right, I think a lot of us would pick the safety on the right. Having said that, we're seeing a lot of bad policies now really coming into the light. And I think there's still a really big role for a Libertarian Party. And that's why I'm really happy to get a chance to be on the ballot in this by-election.
So the new government in BC is a minority one, correct?
They only have a 1-seat lead. And the Green Party, they're the third largest party. Now they have 2 seats, so they make up the balance of power. Having said that, they all obviously Green Party, they lean left, so they'll try and get as much leverage with the NDP as possible. But the Conservatives will have a hard time leveraging anything with the NDP or with the Green Party to get anything they want. I think what we're going to see is basically another 4 years of the same here in BC, but it's a little more tense now.
Okay. All right. So turning to the upcoming by-election, it's a different scene in the sense that this is a federal election. What do you hear from people in terms of their concerns?
One of the things while I was gathering my signatures for the provincial election, I said the upcoming election, everyone said, oh, good. Yeah, we got to get Trudeau out. I'm like, okay, well, that's federal. This is provincial. So I had a hard time helping some people differentiate the things we're supposed to learn in social studies class. But having said that, that was absolutely the theme. I got a lot of it in the Fraser Valley and the Langley, Abbotsford, Aldergrove area was we need to get Trudeau out. So there seems to be definitely a consensus that he's worn out his welcome. His cabinet's worn out their welcome. And I don't know, I mean, some of them speak to, socialist communist policies, or some people talk about the gun grabbing. Perhaps it's the corruption. That it's just being totally not held accountable. So that's usually the first thing I point to. So big government's going to be big government. They're going to do their thing, but it's what we do when they get caught that makes defines us as a first world country. So some of the other topics that really come up obviously are cost of living. That's a huge one, and a lot of people they really think of it as, why are things expensive? And a lot of people lack the economic fortitude to think that the low interest rates are actually bad for the economy, and they lack the ability to understand that grocery stores are not gouging them. They seem to think, what is the government going to do for me? Right. So that's part of our job as messengers, to get that through. But definitely the message is cost of living is out of control. Standard of living is slightly slipping, and they want someone to do something. So again, that's why we were given the opportunity to use these by-elections or general elections to be spokesmen for a message of, hey, there's another way. It's not more government. The answer is less government.
So in recent by-election, the Liberals decided that it was a losing proposition to have Trudeau's picture or name appear on any other lawn signs or anything like that. Do you find the same thing in this election?
We haven't had too many signs up, actually. One of the interesting things in my area, the municipalities are starting to ban election lawn signs and whatnot on public property. So you're seeing a lot less of it. I think that it is a broken idea. The idea is obviously less waste on the signs, less money spent by the bylaw officers. hunting down signs that have fallen in ditches and whatnot, and enforcing these rules. So I get it. They're trying to save money. They're an eyesore. But the reality is, for a lot of people, the only way they're going to know there is a by-election is if they see a bunch of lawn signs down the side of the road. So no, I haven't seen any Liberal signs, and I'm sure you're probably right. I don't even know who the candidate is at this point. I guess I should start doing my homework now, because we have a debate on I think it's December 2nd, an all candidates meeting, and I've been invited as long as I get my signatures in to take part in that.
Oh, good for you, because that's it's often very difficult for smaller parties to get invited.
Yeah, and I have found that with some of our other candidates in the provincial party, and I've never had an issue with it, but definitely, I mean, there's only so much time for the microphone to go around, and some of these associations that put it on, they say only parties that have seats in Parliament are allowed to participate, or anyway, they have all sorts of justifications to keep our ideas out of the public, and they do their best sometimes and sometimes they succeed. But no, I've had a pretty good relationship with the local newspaper. They don't even misquote me. They do a very good job getting my message across without making me look like a monster. Libertarian ideas aren't always easy to stomach for some people, but if taken with the right medicine, with a little bit of sugar, even the left-leaning public can appreciate our ideas.
Do you know what the margin of victory was for the Liberal in the last election?
I don't know. I do know. So it was his name, John Aldag. He won the riding. Then the next election in 2019, he lost it to a Conservative, Tamara Jansen. And then in 2021, he won it back. So now that he's stepped away, Tamara Jansen, the Conservative CPC member, she's won it once already. She's pretty much a shoo-in. Again, talking about this pendulum swinging right, I don't see why it wouldn't go that way. But there are a Green Party and a Liberal and an NDP candidate, and I haven't heard if the PPC are going to field someone or not. But I know a guy named Ian Kennedy has run there in the past, so I'll be interested to see if he has the energy to run in this by-election as well.
So it sounds like it's one of those swing ridings.
It has been, which again, we were talking off air about here provincially in Langley, how we had two NDP MLAs, and you think Fraser Valley a little bit more right leaning, that was unheard of. But then of course there was the correction came this time around. So it's obviously the margin of is a little bit thinner, but like it has been for the last three elections. But this time around, I think we're going to find that the CPC is going to be able to conquer that and not have to worry about vote splitting or anything like that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
When did you say the election was again?
So the election's December 16.
Oh,
so 16. It's right around the corner. I have until Monday morning to get my paperwork in and all my signatures. So we've already been out one day. We were out yesterday with a couple of great volunteers, Lewis Dalby and Jeff Mons. We hit up local Save on Foods parking lot, and we got about 90 signatures already. So that's a great start to the process. I'm going to go out Friday again, my next day off of my full-time job. Hopefully clean up the rest. I got a few people on the sidelines picking up, onesies and twosies, and they're going to scan them and send them over to me. So it went from a very uphill climb to get to that threshold to now I'm very confident. Now it's just a matter of getting the paperwork in and preparing for the all candidates meeting.
Okay. Well, we have a comment here about someone wanting to donate to your campaign.
I haven't set my bank account up yet, but I definitely will be happy to take those donations once I have. As much as we hate government regulation, we also want to stay on the up and up here in the LPOC. So thank you, Keith, for offering, and I will take your name down and be in touch next week once it's all set up.
This is Keith Tays, the Libertarian Party leader of New Brunswick. So good to see you here, Keith, and thanks for the support.
Yeah, so then it was Keith that did reach out to me. He was asking for some ideas on how to set up a provincial party, and I had to admit that I don't know how to set up a party. I do know how to be the leader of one, and do the baseline administrative tasks, and we're doing a pretty good job of that right now, keeping the lights on. But yeah, we had a pretty poor showing provincially. Unfortunately, this time we only had 4 candidates, me being one of them. And, you chalk some of that up to we lost some support to that BC Conservative swing. We had a couple of members go and join them. But I think just in general, there's a real exhaustion of volunteering in this country. And I don't think it's a political apathy. I think it's just people are exhausted and they only have so much time to give, so many resources at their disposal. And so hopefully our party is going to learn from some of the ways we slipped by only having 4 candidates. But it was only 2 elections ago we ran 30 in an election, and that was a pretty good showing.
All right.
Not as good as the Ontario party when they almost had a full slate. Very jealous.
Yeah, but I think the following election it was way down again. It's a struggle to keep it up. But anyway, we do what we can here.
Right. Yeah, well, I was listening to a podcast once. They were talking to one of the administrators with the federal U.S. Libertarian Party, and he says, "Yeah, we've been around for 50 years, and we're still in startup mode." And it feels that way for us as well.
I wonder. I have often wondered, because it's happened to me a couple of times where I present myself as a libertarian, and it's very obvious that the people are confusing me with being a member of the Liberal Party, right?
Yeah.
And so at the federal level, when they were way more popular than they are today, I thought, I wonder if sometimes I'm getting some votes that actually should go to the Liberal. But now it certainly would not be an advantage. Is this something you've ever encountered where?
People say, "Oh, Liberal." I'm like, no, pump your brakes. We're not the Liberals. And in fact, we had a debate about 2-3 years ago within our party on whether to change our party name to something else so that we weren't having to explain that away every single time we were introduced. And I was one of the advocates to keep the name. I like it. It holds us to our principles, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about what we stand for. But there is an argument to be made that we want to disassociate with some of those other parties. One of the things that, so I guess my train of thought, one of the things about the Liberals possibly helping, I had an anecdote from Dan Kincaid. He's a former candidate. I think he ran for the LPOC as well, but definitely for the provincial party. And he says one time he had at the time the best vote total ever for the party, and he said, "Oh, I'm very sure that I got some mistake votes because the Liberal Party candidate had a similar name as he did." So he's pretty sure that even though he would like to take credit for it, that it was probably more likely a mistaken identity.
By the way, I completely agree with you in terms of keeping the name, because if you consider the origin of the term liberal in this country, like if you go back 125 years, what they stood for was much closer to classical liberalism.
Yeah.
And today, so yeah, they're liberal, but only by name, certainly not by conviction, certainly not by principle. Whereas I think in our case, we can say, well, you can look up what the libertarian is, and that's what we stand for, or try
Right.
to anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely feel that we have a lot of first generation immigrants coming from all parts of the world now in our country that are voting, and they identify with liberals because in their country the liberals were the ones advocating for rights and for freedoms, whereas conservatives were advocating to keep people down. And unfortunately, that is obviously not the case here. We're here, the liberals are the ones going back to segregational policies, and it's pretty broken when words don't mean anything anymore. That's our vernacular runs out of ways to describe our political structure.
I'd like to comment on that though, because it's not new that the Liberal Party of Canada is segregationist. Like this is a pattern that they've exhibited for many years. It was a Liberal prime minister that put an end to the Underground Railroad, for example. It was a Liberal prime minister that endorsed the segregation of Japanese Canadians, and forced the Ukrainian Canadians to almost like they were on parole. They had to show up each day at the local police precinct to declare that they were still a resident of and that they weren't a spy. So these kind of segregationist policies that we saw over the past few years from the Liberal Party, to me, is an extension of the pattern.
Fair enough. No, yeah, and you make a good point. It's the same way you look at the U.S. system. How it's the Democrats that have, they talk the good talk about being for the working man and civil rights. When it comes down to it, their track record speaks very differently. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a shame that we're in the situation we're in. Again, the argument could be made that instead of being in a smaller party like ourselves, we should be getting behind one of the bigger machines and trying to utilize our efforts in getting change from within the system, within the establishment parties. But I still think that there is a role for us smaller parties that are principled, that where you're able to keep power from corrupting. And I'm still proud to be a member here, but definitely feels daunting to be up against, like you said, that historical momentum of big government.
I was going to add I will add a more humorous note
Okay.
on this name thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Seinfeld, longstanding sitcom, but in one of them, Jerry Seinfeld was talking about cheering for a sports team, and he made the acute observation that players come and go, right? And he said, really, the only thing that is permanent is the jersey. So you're essentially cheering for a jersey. And along those lines, I find that there are many people now who essentially cheer for a name, or vote for a name, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you would find many people within the Liberal Party who would readily admit that that party is unrecognizable from the version of 30 years ago, right? That, yeah, I mean, it's not like that party was perfect or anything, but in the days of Chrétien and Martin, in terms of fiscal discipline and all that, I mean, they certainly were much more with it, as it were, right? So it's funny because what you then find is that people are not voting on principles. I mean, we just have to look at what happened in the U.S. I mean, that many people will say that the Democratic Party today has almost nothing in common with, say, the days of Clinton, as bad as he was, right? I mean, it's the current version is even worse. But people get in these mindset that, oh, I'm a member of the Democratic Party, regardless of what they do or how they change. And yeah, same thing with the Liberal, really.
No, absolutely. And it's Oh, what was my point? My comment to that? I was listening too acutely, I guess. But really, when the words have lost the meaning, it's we get the chance to sort of rebrand them. So at the same time, we have a chance to explain away what liberal is again to people, because obviously, I mean, all you hear is communists and socialists, but we're able to also say how the CPC. I know I've seen some of these comments. Conservatives are just as bad. Explain away how conservative policies are just progressives going the speed limit. So we want to really reiterate, and we want to stick with protecting real human rights, not negative rights, which unfortunately are what a lot of the progressives are looking to defend. So keep the best of the liberalism and try and prop that up as much as we can.
In light of the problems that you're having, well, I mean, London, which is nearby here, has the same, but with safe injection sites and are you finding it difficult to defend our platform?
That's a great question. I know that even within our provincial party, we had a big division there, because ending prohibition is our take on it. Threatening to throw somebody in a cage for taking a substance, that is totally unlibertarian. So where do we go from there, right? We have to say, well, what are we going to do about it? Well, we're gonna get government out of it as much as we can by getting it off the black market. We'll be able to provide a cleaner supply, and I could lay the whole case out here, but to your point, it's people start glazing over, right? They only hear what you want to legalize heroin. That's all they hear, and it's like, well, yeah, but let me tell you on why that's a good thing, and they don't want to hear it. So definitely, it turns some people off. And like I said, it definitely was the case where the previous or the provincial NDP government, they started decriminalizing drugs. Things got a little messy, and they've backed off of that. So we're now seeing a return to the older prohibition style, where any possession could have you potentially arrested. And again, that's not necessarily helpful to the person who's already suffering from addiction, already using poison, toxic substances. The best thing we can do is get them out of the back alley, get them using something that's safe, bought from a verifiable source, and then get the stigma away from addiction. Legalize addiction, and they'll be easier for them to get the help that a lot of them do want. But unfortunately, when you're having the time of your life, it's hard to ask for help. So it's not up to the government to pull them out. It's up to the government to get out of their way of helping themselves.
I'd like to dig into this. Jacques, go ahead first if you wish.
No, go ahead.
I really think that the government throughout Canada, but particularly in British Columbia, didn't just decriminalize these substances. They then subsidized them.
Yes.
They then changed laws that were hard fought through years of jurisprudence so that people could indulge, let's say, in playgrounds where now these people who are indulging are infringing on others' access to public lands or whatever, however you want to call it. Like, I think if I were to put on my best libertarian hat and say, yes, let's decriminalize these substances. You shouldn't go to jail for smoking a joint or enjoying a substance like this. But I would also suggest that government shouldn't intervene to hand out these drugs. And I don't think we should intervene to provide a safe place. I think if someone wants to indulge and they have a safe place to do it, they do it in their own living room, in their own
Right.
basement, whatever. I have no problem with that. But what we're seeing in BC is that the pendulum had swung so far that now it was infringing on others and causing unsafe circumstances for many others. A lady got shot in Toronto, for example, because there was some sort of dispute outside of the so-called safe injection site on Queen Street, and this lady just standing at the bus stop got shot. Like, so clearly there's a law and order problem.
Right.
That went along with all of this. I wonder, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Like, somehow a libertarian has to find the balance between allowing this liberty and protecting others' safety somehow.
Absolutely. And so you make an excellent point, and subsidizing it, and in some cases almost encouraging the behavior, and when they're handing out paraphernalia, or I mean, in some cases, it's they're inviting the drug users into hospitals, and it's now making hospital staff feel unsafe. And I mean, they got enough problems already. We don't need to add this to their plate. So how do we navigate it? Really, I mean, we could take the next step and say, yeah, I have no problem with a safe injection site. That seems like a logical conclusion. However, should it be subsidized by the state? No, absolutely not. And should they be responsible for any mischief that occurs in and around their facility? Yeah, they absolutely need to be accountable, like any other business would be. Property rights are the thing that we lean on most heavily in our doctrine, right? It's when it's a tragedy of the commons and nobody seems to care about their surroundings, that's obviously an issue. So I mean, you talk about people, loitering in parks and using there, and taking away safe places from our youth and other people to for recreation. Definitely, these are things that we already have laws on the books to enforce, and again, it's this culture that's sprung out of prohibition. Again, it's this nightlife culture where they're in the gutter of our society, and it's not where they belong. But definitely, their law and order is not anything new in this nation. The laws are still there, and as long as we stop incentivizing addiction, right? Stop incentivizing. I think a libertarian should be able to agree that at least what we need to do is stop making them feel like they're at risk for seeking help. But then and that's the counterbalance to, well, we should at least stop giving them free substances. So I don't know if that answers your question. Obviously,
Yeah, I think it's
answer, but
it's really difficult to put these thoughts into something concise. Like, so like you said, if you're talking with someone, they just sort of glaze over and think, oh, you want to legalize heroin. Well, it's a little more complicated than that, but it does take time to kind of navigate through the whole thought process.
Right. And we actually want less drug use. That's our end goal. Like,
yeah.
It's not like we want more drug use and that's why we're legalizing it. It's the same thing as the abortion debate within the libertarian point of view. I mean, I think we have to start with, we want fewer abortions. And how do we get there? Right. And that's the first, we want fewer abortions because they cause harm. So how do we get there? And is going to making it illegal the best way to get there? Well, that's definitely not it. There are other ways that we could encourage that to not happen all the way throughout. And it starts with culture, right? Politics is downstream of culture. So if you think politics is going to fix your culture by putting in a few laws, I mean, that's absolutely asinine. So it is, again, we just have to make sure that anything that we're promoting as a political party, we're doing with the intention that we want the best possible outcome, and this is why we stand for it. It's not we stand for this, out of a prejudice of the alternate view. It's we want the best outcome, and this is how we think we're going to get there.
Very good. Alex, do you think that the election results in the US are going to have an impact on this by-election?
It's very fresh. So again, very fresh off our provincial election we just had in just a few weeks ago, and well, I guess it's a month ago now. But so there's that, and again, that was a rise of the Conservative Party almost taking power within two. If they had two more seats, they would have been in power. The U.S. election with the Republicans taking the presidential, the Senate, and the House. That says a lot for the momentum that they've created there. Again, the pendulum swinging right. So yes, it probably will. I like I said, I thought the CPC candidate, she was probably going to be the shoe-in anyway. But definitely to your point, I mean, with what's going on across the globe, definitely it's kind of flowing. Not quite. I don't like the term populist, but definitely flowing towards candidates that are saying what people want to hear, which not necessarily are going to have all the answers. Their policies are their proposed policies are hollow and broken on their own, but they're saying what people want to hear, and it's going to hopefully get people to come out and vote, because by-elections are historically very poor voter turnout. But I mean, hey, if we got 5 candidates on that ballot and that's not enough to make somebody want to come out and vote, so be it. There's a great case to be made to not vote too.
Now, I have to admit, I am a stickler for the Constitution. So I like to see governments stick to what they're supposed to stick to, which is something that the Liberals certainly don't when it comes to healthcare. But I'm wondering, I mean, it is foremost in the mind of many, many people. The system is terrible shape. I'm sure it's the same thing in BC. How do you deal with question? Because I would be willing to bet that if you go to enough debates, that it's going to come up a lot, right? What are you going to do about healthcare? Of course, I mean, one ready answer would be, this is a federal election and it's not a federal responsibility. But I wonder how you handle it.
Right. And in a previous, in 2019, there was a PPC candidate, and every answer would be, oh, this is a provincial issue, and just pass. Nope, not answering the hard thing. But to take ownership of this, we federally own the Canada Health Act,
right?
And the first thing you need to do is burn it to the ground and rewrite it. The Joehl versus Quebec decision needs to be extended to every province. Same rights.
Please elaborate. What is that decision?
Right. So basically, and I forget the year. I want to say 91, but I'm just pulling that number out of my ass. But it was a court decision where Quebec is allowed to have private health insurance. No other province can, but they're allowed to have a private health insurance provider separate from the public system. Dr. Brian Day was really fighting here in British Columbia, a hero of our time. And unfortunately, he went to the Supreme Court of BC, and the judge said, I realize people are suffering and dying on these wait lists, but if I was to allow this, it would put our socialized universal system at risk, and I can't afford to do that. So he's willing to admit people are suffering and dying because of his decision, but because their dogmatic way of looking at healthcare, he wouldn't undo it. So of course, I think there was the only other appeal was the Supreme Court of Canada for Day, and I don't think that he's gonna take it there. But yeah, that ruling, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Joehl versus Quebec, they earned that right already. And again, as a federal aspect of healthcare, first thing I would do is apply those same rights to every province, that you can have whatever level of healthcare, whatever level of government involvement, whether it's absolutely none, there need to be opt-outs for I would want to rewrite in the Canadian Health Act that there are opt-outs in every province, because of course, I mean, we don't want to overshoot the federal government's role, but it is the role to make sure that the rights are being protected in each province. So we would want to make sure that people weren't being forced into certain schemes that were unconstitutional on their own. After that, I would agree with you. It gets pretty thin on what you can speak to on healthcare, but
Can I add to the list then?
do it.
Because I don't think this is a thin list at all. We could fire Theresa Tam immediately for her involvement with
WHO.
Well, not just that, but breaching the charter rights of Canadians.
Okay.
I think that we could stop all subsidies at a federal level, that because the federal government has intervened in, like, for example, a national pharmacare program. All this does is cause another layer of bureaucracy. Doctors throughout the country now have a federal regulatory process and paperwork they have to do with regard to those pharmaceutical products, and then they have a provincial bureaucracy they have to conduct paperwork for. It's in a lot of areas, I think, like that. There's two governments that doctors have to deal with and that patients have to deal with. I think that getting the federal government out of areas where they've already intervened could be a great project.
I like it. No, I'll definitely add that to my talking points. No, you make a good point, David. It's
as far as private healthcare, I mean, it seems to me that all that's required, and of course, I really like the way you put it about the Canada Health Act, like those 5 conditions. Like, one of them stipulates that provinces are not allowed to allow private delivery of healthcare for fear of losing transfer payments. So if that were to be eliminated, then it would be up to the province to decide if they want to do it or not.
Yeah.
Right? It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know using the carrot definitely is part of the problem. So if we were in a position where we could advocate for eliminating those transfers, well, there's no longer that incentive for the province to continue the same policy. They could pivot from there.
Well, I think it's barbaric. It's barbaric, this idea that, see, a lot of people don't understand that when it comes to, and again, from a libertarian point of view, I'm certainly not advocating for the government to deliver healthcare or education, but given the current state of affair, the two most costly services, if you want, are education and healthcare, and they both happen to be provincial jurisdiction. I mean, when you think about what the federal government is supposed to do, as opposed to, like in Trudeau's world, there's pretty much nothing that the federal government should be doing, which of course is completely wrong. But in general, its taxing power far, far exceeds what it has to deliver.
Right.
And then they got all this excess money, and then they turn around and blackmail the provinces. I mean, certainly if I were PM tomorrow morning, one of the very first things I would do is transfer tax points to the provinces so that they can do as they see fit, as opposed to having to come cap in hand to the federal government and begging them to for some money, which of course usually comes with conditions attached.
Yeah, I know. One of the points that I wanted to make in the provincial election that never really came up, but just repatriating income tax in the provinces, allowing them to collect their own taxes. Right now, I think it's Alberta collects their own corporate income tax, and Quebec collects all their income tax, and every other province it's collected by Ottawa, by the CRA. And so immediately you're crossing your fingers, you're going to get that money back, the money that's owed to you, and it's it could be blackmailed into whatever policy shifts. It's endless. That relationship is incredibly toxic, and it should be totally flipped on its head. I think we all agree. Obviously, we're all believers in decentralization, in almost every instance.
We have two comments here. One is from Keith Tays out in New Brunswick. And during the conversation we had with him online, he spoke of the Singapore model. And so please check that out in a previous video. He went into some depth. And then we also have another comment. Our producer behind the scenes is telling us that we should completely dismantle Health Canada. On that topic, like not only in terms of taxation, which allows the federal government to control how hospitals are administered and how healthcare is administered provincially. There's also a lot of federal control over the doctors and prescription. I believe there's central purchasing of some drugs, some pharmaceutical products that are then pushed through to the other to the provinces. Doctors are given very specific instruction by Public Health Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, as to what they should prescribe if a patient presents with a certain level of cholesterol. Like there's I don't know why we have this federal body that asserts itself as an authority over the doctors that are practicing throughout the country. I think there's a lot of overlap there. I'd like to see that dismantled to some extent.
No, I totally agree. It's all, even within the provinces, the colleges that are the regulatory bodies.
Yeah.
We want to legalize competition amongst them, because again, when there's that monopoly on it, there's no incentive to fix any problems, and in fact, you're able to blackball people to keep good ideas out.
And actually, here's a place where I think the federal government should intervene and have some influence. And that is, do you know how difficult it is for a nurse of one province to move to another province and continue nursing? It's terrible. Like each province has their own unions. Unions are a problem, let's say, on their face. But you leave Saskatchewan and your family may move to British Columbia, for example. You have to quit your job, leave the union in Saskatchewan, go to the new province, apply for a new job. The seniority that you earned in the old province doesn't transfer. Quite often, the new province requires additional education experience. So you've got nurses that have been a nurse for 12 years, and then they find themselves having to go back to college for a year so they can upgrade or something. And like this is a problem. I think people should have mobility across the nation. And if you're a nurse in one province, you should be able to move and become a nurse in another province. It should be much easier. This is why in Windsor, Ontario, I find it interesting that the nurses there, many of the nurses, they actually work in Detroit. I believe it's easier for them as a Canadian citizen and a nurse in Canada to go to a new country and get a job as a nurse than to go to a different province and find a new job as a nurse. It's crazy.
But David, this is just emblematic of the amazing barriers that exist, not only with that, but trade or commerce between the provinces.
Yeah.
I mean, Ontario
we can't take British Columbia wine across the border. Remember, years ago, there was a Alberta provincial politician he staged a kind of protest. He filmed himself, I think, traveling with a bottle of wine from British Columbia into Alberta and sort of dared the RCMP to come and give him a fine.
I love it.
I mean, Keith probably knows this much better than I do, but there was a New Brunswick guy who got arrested coming back from Quebec with a few cases of beer. And he took the government to court and ended up losing. And unfortunately, the details escape me right now, but the ruling, not unlike what Alex described with Dr. Day, the ruling just didn't make any sense at all. But it was like almost like doing the government's bidding by basically, supporting the laws as they existed, even though I think people were arguing from a constitution point of view that these were not correct, and yet the ruling was to back up this guy. It was
Yeah. No, it's definitely they're corroborating the case of a broken system instead of taking the opportunity to fix it. It's I did hear that story as well, and I don't know if I didn't know how it turned out though. I knew he was going to court for it, so he lost it.
he did.
That's
Yeah.
terrible. Ugh.
Okay, Alex. Here's the big question, because this weighs heavily on the mind of Canadian. And I want you to be prepared if in your debate this comes up. You're the prime minister. What would you do about this terrible strike at Canada Post? I mean, my garbage mail is just not coming in now at the same rate as before.
Oh, well, you're talking to somebody that's already not very sympathetic to unions. So being a union buster would be fun. But more importantly, if the example I give people is what happened in Germany. So Deutsche Post was the exact same thing. They had monopoly on all small letter delivery, and they were in the red all the time. So what they did is they legalized all letter carrying competition, but they kept Deutsche Post. And suddenly Deutsche Post leaned out, fired a whole bunch of people, became more competitive, and offered even more services than before, more efficient, started turning a profit. So yes, they were still a government subsidized, government backed company, but now with just adding competition, they instantly were incentivized to actually, contribute something to society. So I said that with every government monopoly, yeah, of course we want to eliminate it. But how about we first just legalize competition? That's a much easier thing for people to palate, right? They hear slashing everything. No, let's just make them work for their supper. So yeah, that's the first thing we would do. If I had a chance to answer that question, it would be. I mean, we already have plenty of companies that are chomping at the bit to get in on that last little sliver of the monopoly, right? That it's just small letter carrying. Everything else is already provided better and more efficiently by private companies. So what use does Canada Post have anymore? Really nothing, except for maybe serving the odd rural corner of the country. And for that, sure, we can keep them around. But the monopoly
Alex,
was out.
on that point, I will
Yeah.
tell you that 3 years ago I was in Dawson City,
Okay.
right, way up north in the Yukon. 2 years ago I was in Yellowknife, and in both cases I made a point of asking the local people about Amazon delivery. Now, they readily admitted we don't get next day delivery like you do in large urban centers, but
Yeah,
he said
okay.
we get our stuff within a week. And to me, that was the death knell of Canada Post, because you're right. That's the one thing that people hang on to, right? Oh,
Yeah.
people in Dawson City wouldn't get mail anymore. Nonsense. I mean,
Nonsense.
Amazon delivers to Dawson City. They could deliver mail.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get an argument for me here, Jacques.
Yeah. No, I'm just adding to
to the point.
arguments.
What service do they offer? Yeah, why keep Blockbuster around?
Yeah.
Yeah. So any other hard hitting questions you guys have that I should be ready for? Remember, I'm representing the party, so want to make sure I'm prepared.
Yes.
How many? So you're about 10 signatures away from having your requisite 100.
Yeah, it's 100. I'm almost there. You always want to get a buffer for when some are illegible or some.
So
are
if people are
slightly-
listening and want to give you their signature,
right?
How do they do that?
Right. So anybody that lives within the Cloverdale Langley city boundaries, there is a form. I've posted it to my own personal Facebook account, but you can also find it on the Elections Canada website. If you have to go digging a bit though. So my name is posted here underneath my mug, so you can look me up on Facebook. I'm the only one, and I had a post recently. I think it was yesterday or the day before. And in the comments, I do have an image of the form, so you could you print it out, you sign it, and you either scan it and email it or take a picture and send it. And that's the easiest way. Or the reality is I'm not very far from anybody who lives in that riding. I'm minutes away, so I could make a point of meeting somebody. I'm always eager to meet anybody that wants to give me the time of day. So
And you said earlier that you're going to set
boundaries.
up an account soon so that you can accept donations. Reach out to you again just by your Facebook page.
Yeah, that's right. I have Twitter and Instagram as well, but Facebook is generally where I'm probably the most active. And then and through my email address, it's my name, alex.joehl@libertarian.bc.ca. And that's and I do have a website, and it's even more simple. It's alexjoehl.com. Not too much content up, especially not federally yet, but that is another way. It's got all my contact information there. So perhaps that's probably the easiest place to send people, alexjoehl.com, and then they'll be able to find all the ways to get a hold of me. And I'll be putting up some more content on there, something relevant to this election, just to make sure people are aware they're at the right landing page.
And to be clear, they don't have to be a member of the Libertarian Party of Canada in order to give you a signature or in order to give you a donation, correct?
Right. So
And
it just has to be a Canadian citizen to give a donation. And I've had people sign that said, you know what, I don't like anything you have to say, but I do believe that you have the right to be on the ballot, so I'm going to sign for you. So, and those are some of the
yeah,
best people we have in this country.
and so for those of you just tuning in or that you weren't here at the beginning, I mean, Alex, the reason we're having this conversation about his signatures and donations is because he's coming up to a by-election in the Langley area. Alex, along your way, are you meeting others that you think would also be interested in becoming a candidate for the party, like in a future federal election?
A lot of people are afraid to take that step. They don't realize that there are supports out there. For example, I've done this whole signature collection thing on my own before, and it's not fun, but it's also not insurmountable. But we have these networks, we have hundreds of members across, all these communities that there's going to be somebody that can come out, and it's as simple as making time, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, helping somebody out. So even if you're not going to be a candidate, it's about getting involved with a candidate's campaign. And it's while you're doing that you might find that, hey, maybe I could do that. Because as much as we do want really strong, good candidates being supported, we also want as many names on the ballot as we can get. So it's that double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, so here's a question. Someone made a comment here about moving the needle. The comment is, what's missing where libertarians are not more popular and understood? The needle never seems to move appreciably. What's the strategy? Maybe, Alex, tell us, who in your riding do you think would be your nearest political ally, like from which other party? Or what is the strategy to become more visible against your greatest opponent? Like who's the opposite of libertarianism in your riding?
Oh, okay. So I really like this question. I need to pause my camera for a moment to plug my laptop in. Sorry, guys, it's about to die. But
Well, then
I'll think on this. Give me
we'll play some background music while you're busy or something,
fantastic.
or Jacques and I can talk. Hey, speaking of Jacques, Jacques
David will sing
traveling
for us. David will sing.
No, you don't want me singing,
No,
but
okay.
Jacques going to be in Lethbridge this week. Tell us a little about that, Jacques.
Right. So I will be at the University of Lethbridge at 2 p.m. on Friday. I am presenting a lecture entitled Civil Liberties Under Assault, where I'm going to discuss, unfortunately, what I think the precedents that have been created during the COVID, and then go on to talk about, again, speaking in terms of precedents, Bill C-63. I'm going to talk about that quite a bit. And then central bank digital currencies. And again, how these things are an assault on our civil liberties. And
yeah,
so,
and
so that's
the new version of the Arrive Can,
right,
which
right.
is being piloted and apparently a requirement, or soon to be made a requirement of people that are traveling across the border, that you'll have to send your photo or other biometrics in advance of showing up at the border. Yeah, so Jacques will be in Lethbridge. Is that an open conversation? Like if people are kind of in the area, southern Alberta, that they can show up and be there for 2 p.m., where would they find you?
Well, I've certainly told my followers on X that I'm going to be there because I don't think that the university is going to turn anyone away. I mean, it would be great if we ran out of room, and but it's part of Friday afternoon kind of lecture circuit where the guy running it invites different people to come and talk. And he had seen me at the conference in Calgary that I was at in May, liked what he saw, and invited me. And then at 6 o'clock on Saturday, I will be attending a Libertarian get-together at the Limericks pub.
The Limerick pub in downtown Calgary.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that's hosted by Clayton, who was on our show. You had an interview with Clayton a few weeks ago.
Right.
So welcome back, Alex. Let's return to that question. I was asking you, I guess, like, who's the opposite in your riding, and how do we move the needle?
One of the best ways definitely to stand out is to try and differentiate from the people closest to you. And generally that always was the conservatives. So I would always point out how they're hypocrites and how their policy, they don't actually do what they say, how their policies actually cause more harm than good. They're just interested in growing the state. Then the PPC came along, right? They libertarian light, some of them wanted to say. So one of the things I remember, it was in 2019 when Tim Moen was still leading the party, and that's when we put on our platform to completely eliminate the income tax, because we had to out libertarian the PPC. And I think that really it forced us to swing hard toward our principles instead of trying to have this middle ground. So how do we move the needle? It's we need to be as libertarian as we can and stop pussyfooting around the issues. Because if we're just trying to be conservatives with a heart, or we're trying to be, NDP with a good sense of money, that's not going to get us any votes. That might get us, a few more handshakes after the meetings. It might get us, some compliments in the newspaper afterwards, but it's not going to gain any traction. So we need to be unapologetically libertarian to our principles. But you ask, who's the most like us? Who's the most different? A lot of the progressive parties, you find that they have some very libertarian ideas too, by accident. Like I remember being told that I would make an excellent Green Party candidate. And I thought, well, I'll take that as a compliment. I don't know. That could have gone multi ways, but it just shows that across the spectrum, I mean, these parties are all over the map, and we're the only ones that are sticking to our principles. So eventually some of these parties, they're going to get it right.
I used to think similarly about the Green Party, and then realized that actually that's a very statist party. They want, let's say, some of the outcomes that a libertarian may want, but the strategy they have is through government intervention. So I don't find myself having much in common anymore with Green Party candidates, even though I have voted Green Party in the past, believe it or not. But back to your comment about differentiating from the conservatives, the PPC, I had a question in my mind here. The getting rid of income tax, that's what it was. Yeah, you said get rid of income tax, and that was central to the ideas presented in 2019 by the party with Tim Moen. I was recently in conversation with someone who spent a lot of their life in Saudi Arabia, not as a citizen, but as a resident and working there. There's no income tax in Saudi Arabia, but they have lots of wealth, and it's definitely not libertarian. So how do we think that they do that? How do they have rich infrastructure, roads, giant buildings, lots of technological advancement, but no income tax, and it's not libertarian?
Well, I don't have an answer for you. I was hoping you were going to tell me. I mean, my gut says that it's a lot of taxes on the resources that are being pulled from the ground. I
I
bet
think
a
it
lot.
is royalties, yeah.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of the projects are funded privately by. I mean, like we always say, where people say like, "Well, who's going to build the roads?" And the answer is whoever wants them. whoever whoever wants them is going to build it. So I mean, you look at a situation like that where, yeah, sure, there's no income tax and they have all sorts of infrastructure regardless. Well, it came from somewhere. So yeah, I mean, like you said, there's nothing libertarian about any nation in the Middle East. They're incredibly totalitarian, totalitarian in many ways, some more than others, but that doesn't mean that it's not a safe haven for some people. If you're in the right line of work and you keep your nose clean, I've been told that they're great places for you to move and regain some of the liberties that we've lost here. Actually,
Yeah, except you're not allowed to own property unless you're not a citizen, and
yeah.
you know, like, there are some obvious restrictions
Yeah.
in that because it's a very nationalist environment. Um, I don't have another question at the moment. Over to you, Jacques.
Well, just a quick comment about this income tax thing. I mean, I think that Alex is right. It's royalties in Saudi Arabia that allow the funding of many of these things. And I prefer, like, those are somewhat unusual situation. I quite often, even though they're not libertarian countries well, no, I should say they're not libertarian countries, but I, in trying to get across to people the benefits of freedom, I bring up every time I get a chance Singapore and Hong Kong, two tiny countries that have zero natural resources, and yet they make the top 5 in terms of GDP per capita year in and year out. And again, they do have income tax, but the freedom index that they score is, again, it's not libertarian quite, but it's way higher than it is in any of the Western countries that you can care to imagine. And you know that I use that to say more freedom is better, and that's the way we have to go.
Right, take our wins where we can. Yeah, anytime you can move the needle towards freedom. But I mean, you look at Singapore as an example of culturally, though, they're a very conservative nation and not very tolerant of alternative ways. So, like you said, economic freedom versus social freedom. Some people will take the economic freedom in a heartbeat and fall in line, but that's the beauty of the global world that we have. It would be nice if everyone had a choice on what kind of situation they want, but there's just not a lot of that lateral movement, the ability for the lateral movement. Just with, again, we talked about at the beginning with the cost of living being so bad, some people can't even afford to move across town, move to another province where it might be beneficial to them. Like David, you were talking about, just move to Airdrie. I mean, some people can't make that journey for a career, even though it might totally improve their lifestyle. So, I mean, again, we want to drive down drive down inflation, drive down the way that it's just eating away at people's purchasing power. These are easy talking points for a libertarian. Economic, market fluency, and then when people just have more money, they're able to make more choices. They'll have more things at their disposal, and they can move to a Singapore if they want, or to a Saudi Arabia. and or just move to Alberta.
Yeah, or just move within their province. Like in British Columbia, is there a land transfer tax?
Yeah, yeah.
Like when
Property transfer tax.
this was crazy to me. I grew up in Saskatchewan. If you move, you pay $200 as a fee to the land titles office to update your record.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Ontario, of course, I learned of this land transfer tax. It's tens of thousands of dollars on every property that is bought or sold.
And
So
every
I
time.
remember meeting. So like this interrupts freedom of mobility. I believe it's a.
Yeah.
For example, I met a lady that works in Markham, but she lives in, I want to say Mississauga, but I mean West Mississauga. And her commute was 2 hours every day to the Markham office. This was back when we worked from the offices. But it was crazy to me that she wouldn't just maybe move, maybe get an apartment nearer to her job. But the land transfer tax prevented her from doing that. I wondered, is that a problem in British Columbia? Like, so you're in Langley, maybe you want to open up a business, 2 hours north or Prince George or something. Like, can people just pick up and move? Or is there a financial barrier there?
Oh, there are so many barriers. Provincial legislation, they just brought in a home flipping tax. I think it's called something else. But
Right.
basically, if you sell your house within less than a year of owning it, you have to pay a tax on it. And it's to protect against, all the abuse that you see in the real estate market. Don't get me wrong, well intentioned, but the consequence is now you're limiting people's options and limiting people's choices. And for what? It's at best a tax grab. It looks good. It's window dressing, but it's just again adding another burden to people having what they want, being where they want. And that's just the latest one. Like I said,
Okay, I've got a question for both of you then, and this is a legit question. I don't have an answer for this from a libertarian perspective, but on the issue of home flipping, and government wants to intervene with a tax on flipping and stuff like that. I think they're penalizing the wrong thing. I actually would like to have a conversation about whether non-citizens should be able to own residential properties. Like spectators, prospectors, REITs, real estate investment trusts. Like, to what extent would a Libertarian Party restrict ownership of property from among non-citizens?
We on our provincial platform, it carried over from the last one, and I saw no reason to change it. But it basically says we're all for foreign investment. However, we would be against numbered companies owning property. So you need to be a registered entity. So not some sort of shell company. Just to add a little bit of transparency, add some legitimacy to it, and that would be our only real requirement. Because as soon as you start limiting who can invest in your province, I mean, or in your country, you start to keep money out that would otherwise add to prosperity. I understand the idea. You don't want them coming up, buying up things and using it for investments to take all the profits back to their own countries at the and raising costs for the residents here. Yeah, I've heard the arguments, but I think the libertarian angle is to not stop it, but just to try and keep it relevant, or keep it above water, so to speak. I think that's what we really want to do. Jacques, what do you think?
I have learned over the years that well-intentioned, looks good on the surface policies don't they don't stand scrutiny. So I mean, sometimes these things are not obvious and you do have to think them through, but I'd be very reluctant to go there. I mean, for one thing, a thought experiment would be, why would a Chinese person come in this country, buy property, and not occupy it, right? I mean, if the idea is that it's they're buying it because they're hoping to make a profit at some point, well, then that becomes speculation. And I think the literature around speculation is such that it does not deserve at all the black mark that's been put on it. Speculators play an important role, and speculators quite often get burned very badly. Because think of it this way: if you buy something because you think it's going to go up, okay, so if you allow speculators, what is going to happen? Well, it's actually going to move the upward movement sooner than it otherwise would happen, right? And then when things have gone up quite a bit, and at that point they come to market and, okay, I'm going to make my profit, I'm going to sell, then now that's going to have a downward pressure on prices. So the end result of a speculator is to make the upward trend smoother than otherwise would be. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So again, I would probably have to go away and give it more thought, but I just don't think that. Yeah,
What
very
about
good comment
state
here. Someone is adding that speculators take risk and they do provide liquidity. That's another. It's another good reason why I would be very reluctant, because I think on balance it would do more harm, such a law, than good.
What about state actors? What if it were discovered that the Chinese Communist Party had funneled, trillions into purchasing land in Canada and owned 20% of the land mass?
Okay, interesting one. I certainly would have to take that one away.
Like, I think there's a like Alex, you said it would have to not be a numbered company, so it would have to be an identifiable person or corporation,
Person or corporation, yeah. But
and
that's
that
easy
corporation
enough to
isn't
do.
receiving money from hostile states or something.
I would argue that it would be no different than China owning billions and billions of dollars of our debt. They if they ever want to collect on it, we're indebted to them. If they want to own our land through a legitimate means, I don't see an issue. I'm not going to simp for the Chinese Communist government here, but I would argue what has occurred in our nation that that this is something that is desirable for their government to do, and why we're in a position where it's happening. Like what has occurred in our economic prosperity, that it's happening, and what has happened, what has China done right to be able to lock up a large chunk of our property. So it's not an unforeseeable idea, David. So it's a
I think it's a tough one.
It's a well thought experiment, but
Yeah.
I don't have an answer other than I don't think that a libertarian would want to put a stop to it out of principle. No matter, for all the things Jacques said, all these regulations will have unintended consequences on their own. But
Interesting to think, though, that maybe the free market, maybe it have boundaries? Like, would we want a global free market where, let's say, real estate in this part of the world is up for sale for others throughout the world in that market? Or is the free market, does it have a boundary at the borders of our country, and foreign trade is, let's say, part of the federal government's foreign policy responsibility? Like, does the free market end at our border or not? I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there. I don't think these answers are easy, but
I think we'll need another hour and a half to get through that
hour.
one.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It's
because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't operate a free market, for example. No. So they can accumulate significant wealth through slave labor, let's say, and then use that wealth to cause let's say, political instability in our country through, for example, owning gold mines and steel mines and land and so forth. I think it's complicated. I mean, I think
Well, the
I'd be
answer
really
is
interested to have
complicated.
a hard conversation about that.
Probably won't come up in a 2-minute answer at an all candidates meeting, though.
That's a good point. Yeah.
No,
But thanks for entertaining it.
Yeah, no, of course. We like to nerd and geek out on these things, right? That's the whole point. And talking amongst ourselves. In Ancapistan, of course, there's only private property and there are no boundaries, but it's that's not the world we live in. So you're right. There could be some sort of government intervention to keep bad players out of certain markets, but yeah, that
Maybe the
be.
boundary is where the law, where Canadian courts can actually enforce the law. Maybe that again, but that's for another conversation. So, by the way, for those of you tuning in, the Libertarian Lens series, which is part of what we're doing here, we have guest speakers, and we talk about philosophy and libertarian ideas and libertarian policy futures. We also have a show called Libertarian Currents, where usually Jacques and I, sometimes we have a third, our producer, who react to current events. This evening we've been with Alex, and I feel like we're wrapping up a bit, unless there are other topics that we should explore. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm on a different time zone than you guys, and I wouldn't mind if we ended soon.
And I do have somewhere else to be too, but
so Alex,
really
how about the last word to you? Give us a plea, for those watching, how they can help you one last time, to how they can help you donate and support you in the upcoming by-election.
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate everybody that logged on and listened, and anyone who took the time to listen to the recording. If I'm able to get it sent out to my viewers, this by-election isn't going to change much. I know that the federal Liberals, they have a razor thin hold on their government at this point. So if they lose one more seat, the chance of maybe an earlier election than October is even more possible. But in all likelihood, all this is going to do is continue to just cement that, yes, the CPC is probably going to be our next government. So I'm not going to focus on winning. Anyone who's supporting me, it's not to get a victory. You're supporting me to get my message out. And that message is that we are the only principled party that has libertarian values. We have been consistent since 1973. And I'm just really excited to be an option on the ballot for some people that otherwise would have no other reason to get off the couch and vote. Because I know myself in previous elections, it's been hard to figure out who to vote for if there's not a libertarian on the ballot. So I'm very proud to be given the opportunity to put the party's name next to mine this time around. So you go to my website, alexjoehl.com, and there you can get all sorts of info on my social media pages, email address, and if you want to add in some donations to my campaign, I'll be able to create some sponsored ads, some content like that. I would appreciate that greatly, and I'll be setting up my account soon so I can accept those. So yeah, thank you again, everyone who already expressed support. And thank you again to Jeff Mons and Louis Dalby, who were boots on the ground for me, getting signatures, and for everyone else that's going to help me from here on out. December 16th is not far away. It'll be over before I know it.
Well, that's great to hear, Alex. So thanks for this evening and the conversation. Jacques, final words?
Well, Alex, thank you very much for coming on, and I wish you the very best. I really liked what I heard tonight, You're articulate. You clearly know your stuff. It's amazing. You talk to libertarians, and boy, they are better read than just any other politician, which is in many ways what makes it so frustrating, right? I mean, we have educated ourselves more than the other ones, and we go beyond the cliches and the slogans. So anyway, best of luck to you. I hope you do really well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, guys.